Today we're going to do a fraction multiplication review, okay? So some important things to remember about multiplication when you're dealing with fractions. You do not have to change the denominators. So when you add and subtract, you're finding your total number of pieces. But when you're multiplying fractions, you're looking for a part of something. So it's a little bit different. So when you're multiplying, you don't have to change denominators. So that's kind of nice. Both numbers need to be fractions. So if you're multiplying a fraction times something, you have to turn the other number into a fraction. That might mean if you're multiplying a fraction times a whole number. So if you're trying to find 4/5 of 9, okay, in order to find 4/5 of 9, you would multiply 4/5 times 9, okay, to find a fraction of a number we multiply. And then you would have to turn 9 into a fraction simply by putting a 1 underneath it, because that would be 9 ones, which is the same thing as 9, and then you multiply, okay? The other instance when both numbers need to be fractions is if you're multiplying mixed numbers. So if you had two mixed numbers, or if you had one fraction times a mixed number, whatever the case may be, if you have a mixed number, in order to multiply, you have to turn it into a fraction. So you remember you use what's called our fraction wheel, or what I call our fraction wheel. You multiply the bottom number times the whole number, add the numerator, and that's going to tell you what it's going to be. So it's going to be 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25, and the denominator stays the same, 25, 6. Okay? So in order to multiply, both numbers have to be fractions. Multiply across numerators and denominators. Okay? So let's keep this one. I'm just going to move it over a little bit more so you can see better. Okay, so there's the one where we turned our improper fraction into a mixed number. Now, by the way, because we made our mixed number into an improper fraction, this is bigger than 1, right? So that means that this number is going to increase, which means our answer is going to also be an improper fraction, which means when we get our answer, we're going to have to turn it back into a mixed number according to the last one here. But let's take care of this one first. Multiply across. So 2 times 25 is 50. Oh, that was a nice easy one. And then 5 times 6 is 30. So you have 50 30ths, okay? So when you get to your answer, you have to do a couple things. If it's an improper fraction, you're going to have to turn it into a mixed number, and then you're going to have to make sure it's in simplest form. Okay? If it's a fraction, you just have to make sure it's in simplest form. But if it's an improper fraction, it needs to be turned into a mixed number. So 50 is more than 30. So if your denominator is 30, that means your pieces are 30ths, which means it's going to take 30 pieces to equal 1. So if you have 50, you know you can make at least one group of 30, right? Okay? So when you're turning an improper fraction into a mixed number, and if it's simple numbers, sometimes you can do it in your head, but you should know how. If you take that 50 and you see how many groups of 30 you can make, that's going to tell you what your whole number is going to be. So you just simply do numerator divided by denominator. Luckily, these are easy numbers. 30 does not go into 5, but it will go into 50 once, and I know it's not going to go into 50 twice because 3 times 2 is 6, okay? So it goes in there once, which is 30. We subtract, and we get 20, so we have 20 left over. So I can make one whole, so that's going to be my whole number. I can make one group of 30, so that's one whole, okay? I come down here, I have 20 leftovers. So that's my new numerator because I have 20 leftover 30ths. Our denominator stays the same, okay? So I have 1 and 20 30ths. So the only thing I would need to do at this point is just make sure the fraction itself is in simplest form. And we do that by seeing if there's a number that I can divide both 20 and 30 by. Now hopefully you know that both 20 and 30 can be divided by 10. If you weren't sure, you could list your factors of 20 and your factors of 30 and see what the biggest number they share is. 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. I think it's about it. 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10. So if I look at this, here is what I already suspected, that the biggest number they share is 10. So what that means is I can come over here and I can turn my fraction to simplest form by dividing the top and the bottom by 10. Remember, it always has to be the same number. So if the bottom number was 32, I could not divide them both by 10. So 20 divided by 10 is 2, and 30 divided by 10 is 3, so 2/3. And 2/3 is in simplest form because this number is only one smaller than that number. So my 1 20/30 becomes 1 2/3 is my final answer. Okay, so there's a lot of steps there, but we're just taking pieces of things that we've already done and kind of putting them together. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, which I think you guys have realized as we've been doing problems together. All right, so now this extra step of turning it into a mixed number is only if you're going to multiply your fraction by something bigger than 1, okay? Because if we multiply two fractions together, so let's say that I had 3/4 of a cake left. So here's this. I've got 3/4 of a cake left. So there we go. There's my 3/4 of a cake. I have 3/4 of cake left. Now, this morning, I woke up and I ate 2/3 of what was left. Not 2/3 of the whole cake. If I ate another 2/3 of the whole cake, then I would subtract. But if I ate 2/3 of what was left, that would be 2/3 of 3/4. So to do that, I would find 2/3 of what was left, which was 3/4. Okay? Remember that of, when you're dealing with fractions, becomes multiplication. So I'm going to find 2/3 of 3/4. Now, they're already both fractions, so I don't have to change denominators. They're already both fractions, so I'm good to go. I'm going to multiply across numerators, that's 6. I'm going to multiply across denominators, which is 12. So by the way, remember when you multiply by something less than 1, your number is going to go down. Since both of these numbers are less than 1, my answer is going to be smaller than both those numbers. Okay? So 6/12 is actually smaller than 3/4 and 2/3. Okay? So 6/12 is my answer. So in this case, it's not an improper fraction. I don't have to turn it into a mixed number. All I really have to do is check and see if it's in simplest form. So is there a number that both 6 and 12 can be divided by? Hopefully you know that they can both be divided by 6. And if not, you're going to find their factors, okay? So 6 and 12, 1 times 6, 2 times 3, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. The biggest number they share is 6, and also 6 is half of 12, which means our fraction is going to be 1/2. So you divide them both by 6, and your simplest form is 1/2. And remember, whenever our numerator is 1, our fraction is in simplest form. All right, so there's that. Now, the other instance, and I think I already talked about this, but if you were to multiply a fraction times a whole number, so let's say you had 5 groups, 5 sandwiches, and each sandwich was 2/3. So let's say you ate 5 2/3. So let's say sandwiches were cut into thirds, and you ate 5 of those 2/3. I don't know, kind of whatever. You have the same number over and over again, okay? In order to multiply this, you put a 1 underneath it. And even if it's the other way around, because remember with multiplication, you can switch your numbers. If you're finding 2/3 of 5, see, the problem's going to be different though. So if somebody says, what's 2/3 of 5 donuts? You would multiply 2/3 times 5. And in order to do that, you'd still have to put a 1 underneath. Okay? And then you just multiply across. 5 times 2 is 10. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 5 is 10. 3 times 1 is 3. So you can see you're going to get the same answer, whether this number is first or second. It's going to come out the same. And again, because you're multiplying by a whole number, which we turn into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath it, your answer is going to become an improper fraction more than 1 because this is more than 1, so your number is going to increase. So you have an improper fraction, which you need to turn back into a mixed number. Okay, your denominator is thirds, so each group of 3 will be 1 whole. So how many groups of 3 can you make if you have 10? And then the rest is your leftover fraction. Again, to turn a improper fraction into a mixed number, you're going to top, I almost got it, numerator divided by denominator, okay? So you're going to do top divided by bottom. 3 goes into 10 3 times, which is 9. I have 1 left over. I can make 3 groups of 3, so that's 3 wholes. This number is always your whole, and your remainder becomes your leftover fraction. So that becomes your new numerator, and you have 1 leftover what? You have 1 leftover third. So you're going to get 3 1/3. And 3 1/3 is already in simplest form because the numerator is 1. So hopefully this helps you on your way.